As humans, we have the unique ability to make sense of life through stories. Whether it be through movies, TV shows, books, the news, music, or our conversations, there's always an aspect of storytelling in our day-to-day lives. What's cool is our faith is actually centered on stories. The stories of the Bible teach us about who we are, who God is, and how we ought to live in this world. They also force the reader to reflect on our lives, which in turn implements them into our memories. From the beginning, we learn that greed for knowledge can sacrifice our place in paradise when Eve eats the apple from the tree of knowledge, ultimately sacrificing her place in the Garden of Eden. Next, we learn the curse of kin killers, when Cain kills his brother Abel. And lastly, we learn the art of selflessness, when Jesus is hung up on the cross to save us. All of these stories stick with us in one way or another to teach us and guide us to better understand ourselves and the world around us. The same can be said for novels. Throughout my capstone experience, I have come to realize that reading and writing can provide places of refuge, safety, and peace. To be honest, I never enjoyed reading until COVID hit. I had begun to feel lost in who I was and struggled with my self-worth. I started feeling like I was drowning in my thoughts and began to sacrifice bits of myself to fit other standards for me. Through reading, however, I found the strength to stand up for myself and to not conform to what others wanted me to be. Reading has been a way for me to traverse through my imagination and reconnect with who I am, who I want to be, and has provided a place of refuge. I've also learned that I want to experience and learn how it has impacted others. So with some guidance by Mrs. Stidham, I decided to interview Miss Anna Static. When questioned how reading or writing has impacted her life, she replied that writing, in particular, has been a refuge for her in difficult times. In her early 20s, Anna Static struggled with her mental health, and through writing a memoir called By Name, she was able to find peace with what had happened, which ultimately healed her from those experiences. She also told me that reading has also helped her. She said, and I quote, "Reading brought me peace too, because I was reading other people's stories of trauma, other people's stories of hardship, and seeing how they overcame those obstacles helped me in writing, which brought me peace." I also interviewed Mr. Butler. When asked a similar question, he replied that reading for him is a place of sanctuary. He clarified that it is not a form of escape or escapism, but a place of rest in the midst of the chaos. Authors create these new worlds for us to step into and be a part of. And when we have to step back and go back into our world, we're able to bring a piece of it with us. He expressed, and I would like to agree, that reading is therapeutic. Another way in which I research how story can impact the world is through history and culture. When I asked Butler how reading has impacted him the most, he replied that it has given him access to things, people, and ideas that he normally doesn't have access to. And it allows him to experience the past to better understand why the world is the way it is. There's a certain value in reading historical fiction and nonfiction, as it allows us access to historical empathy so we can better understand why things happened the way they did and why things are the way they are now. There's also value in literature over the internet. While we can go on YouTube and watch documentaries and TV shows about things, people's ideas, and events from history, reading what they actually wrote and how they wrestled with the world expands our hearts so that we may do it the same way and wrestle with those concepts. Because of this, I wanted to research a few books that have impacted our more modern world. The first of which is Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin is one of the major causes of the Civil War. It's themes that speak out against the treatment of human beings as property and slavery, and its pro-abolitionist views got it banned in the South before the war. Another book that has impacted the world is The Odyssey by Homer. The Odyssey is one of the oldest texts that we have, and it provides insight into the ancient Greek world. It also enables readers to wrestle with concepts such as fate and free will. Ever since I read the first Percy Jackson books, I've been enamored with different mythologies and folktales from different cultures. So by combining my two favorite subjects, history and English, I was able to research how different mythologies impact each other in the world today. Through my research, I realized that there are different themes and common themes in the creation stories. While most of them are separated by different geographical barriers, a lot of them have the same basic elements of how the world came to be. An example of this is supreme beings. There is almost always a supreme being or beings in a mythology. There are the Greek and Japanese gods and goddesses, the Iroquois Sky Woman and her sons, and the Australian Aborigine God, Father of all spirits and Sun Mother. The Bushmen, an indigenous tribe in South Africa, also honor the god King, and as we know, Christians and Jews worship God. I also wanted to take a more in-depth look into Greek and Roman mythology. While they have a lot of similarities, they are also quite different. Greek mythology itself predates Roman by 1,037 years, and places a lot of emphasis on physical appearance, such as beauty, like Aphrodite, and ugliness, like Hephaestus. Roman mythology, however, places less emphasis on physical appearance, and originally the gods are genderless and are named after objects. Despite these differences, it is still apparent that Roman was created after and it was heavily influenced by Greek mythology, as the Odyssey was written 9 years before Rome was founded. Zeus is Jupiter in Roman, Poseidon is Neptune, Aphrodite is Venus, and Ares is Mars. Another way in which I wanted to research how different mythologies have impacted each other is through different Japanese deities. Fun fact, some of the Japanese deities did not, in fact, originate in Japan. The first deity I researched was Benzaten. Benzaten is a joyous Japanese goddess who dispenses luck and wisdom. She is both a Buddhist and Shinto kami, or god, and she began as the Indian goddess Sarasvati. Next is Bishamonten. Bishamonten is a Japanese warrior god who is a protector of Buddhist worshippers, offerings, and temples. He began in India as the Buddhist god Vasravana and got his fame by protecting Buddha on his teachings. And lastly, Daikokuten. Daikokuten is a revered household Japanese deity who dispenses luck and fortune. He began as the Hindu god Mahakala. When I asked Anastatic how reading has further impacted her life, she replied that it has provided her new passions and the ability to see the world through other people's eyes. Upon further reflection, I too have come to realize that I am able to connect themes and societal issues from the books I read to politics and happenings of our world. I am also able to experience the world from other perspectives and gain insight into ideas I've never thought of before. I can also travel to different countries and continents without even leaving Littleton, and am able to experience worlds that will only ever exist on paper. Lastly, I began my journey of writing my own book. I went into it thinking, how hard could it be? You're just creating a world. It's very difficult. The characters for me were quite easy to come up with, as I've always had a creative mind, but coming up with the government and the history and the plot and society was very difficult. So about a year ago, I came up with an idea for a book. I created characters, and I was like, I like the way this is going, and then I did nothing with it. This past fall, I revisited the idea and completely trashed all of it. I ended up keeping the characters and slowly started building my world that I'm working on. Throughout my world building, I realized that my characters did not connect to my plot or the society of my book, which ended up being very problematic. With the help of a friend, I was able to figure out that I have to create the plot and the societal structure first, and then work the characters and the backstory into that. After that, everything began to click into place. Now the backstories of my characters are aligned with the societal structure and corruption of the world, which is involved with the plot and the end goal of my book. In January, I began my writing process. Due to my own self-sabotage, I only have the prologue, chapter 1, and the beginning of chapter 2 of my book written. I learned that saying I'm going to write and actually writing are two very different things. And I realized that I lack the motivation and energy to write. So I've come to realize that I have to schedule time that I'm going to sit down and write. If I don't, then nothing will get done. I also realized that it is very hard for me to write when I'm at home. I easily get distracted by my phone, or I'm distracted by the dogs, or anything and everything in my room. So I have to go to bookstores or libraries or coffee shops so that I can solely focus on my writing. Through my interviews, I've come to realize that everyone has a different process in which they write. What works for Anastatic and Sarah J. Maas and other authors may not work for me. For me, I have to plan out every chapter before I write it. I do this with a bullet-pointed list so that I can cross off things that I include in the chapter and I won't forget it when I'm writing it. Due to this process, I have 18 chapters of my book outlined. I hope to have more in the future. And another one of my processes is similar to Mr. Butler. We both have notes on our Notes app on our phones for the current book that we're working on. For me, I have songs and lyrics that remind me of my characters, and I know for the both of us, we have like different plot lines and scenes and quotes that we want to include, but we don't have the time to, so we save it for later when we can. Another thing that has impacted my writing is my love of mythology and history. Almost all of my characters are modeled after different mythological beings, and the history of my world has similarities to the history of our world. So, going into my characters, my first character that I've created is Brinley. She is my female protagonist. Brinley is modeled after a kitsune, which is a paranormal Japanese fox. These foxes possess powers that increase with age and wisdom, and they have the ability to shift into human form. They're often depicted as tricksters, but some folktales say that they are faithful guardians, friends, and lovers. Specifically, Brinley is modeled after a kazai, which is a fire type of kitsune. She relates to these creatures with her magic, which is fire and plant, her urge to protect those who can't protect themselves, and her ability to shift into a fox form. My next character, yes, you may look at your things, by the way. Your next character is Silas, and he is modeled after a hellhound. Hellhounds are supernatural dogs that originate in the underworld and are often seen as omens of death. Their eyes either glow a yellow or a red, and they are often seen as aggressive and are antagonized by many. However, when they are called upon or summoned, they can be very loyal to their masters and protect the needy. Silas relates to these creatures as, since he is a pirate, his ship is named the Hellhound and is seen as an omen of death. When he uses his powers, his eyes glow a bright red, and he has a strong loyalty and compulsion to protect others. My next character is Katana. Katana is modeled after Sokar, an Egyptian death god. Sokar is often depicted as a mummified man with the head of a hawk or a falcon. He carries passengers to his tombs in a silver bowl and is a silversmith himself. Katana relates to him as she is an assassin who obviously carries people to their deaths, has a pet falcon that relays messages to the king, and she has silver knives and weapons and talons that she creates herself. She also has bandages on her forearms and her neck that resembles mummification. My next character is Demarcus. Demarcus is modeled after water sprites and naiads. These creatures are from European descent and have the ability to breathe on both water and land. They are also depicted as beautiful and lighthearted. Demarcus is modeled after these creatures as he can breathe in both water and on land, and he is seen as having immense beauty as he's the prince, and he is both lighthearted and kind. My next character is, not to play favorites, but my favorite, is Shade. Shade is modeled after the Inuit shadow people, who are masters of shadow, invisibility, and obscurity. These creatures are either invisible to the eye or present themselves as shadows with white glowing eyes. They are able to live like any other human being would. They have homes and families and jobs, but just in a shadow realm. Shade connects to these creatures as she also has shadow magic, which she can become shadow, and her eyes glow white. When she's not using her magic, her eyes are silver. And she is a thief that has never been caught, and so she's a master of obscurity. And my last character is not modeled after a mythological being, but honorary mention anyway, is Braxton. I see him as more of a timid golden retriever puppy, and he has a kind and lovable nature. And lastly, the history of my world shares aspects with social Darwinism, genocide, and its societal structure is similar to that of feudalism. After Capstone, I hope to continue writing and ultimately finish my book and eventually get it published in the near future. Through my interviews, outlining and writing my book, and researching different mythologies and cultures, I have come to realize that storytelling impacts everyone in a different way. For some, it is a place of respite and inner peace. For others, it adds to their culture and religion and enables them to see into the past. And for me, it has been a way for me to reconnect with myself and see the beauty of the world. Because of these reasons, I have decided that my future career needs to have 3 components: writing, story, and cultures. I'm going to be studying at CSU and majoring in international studies, concentrating on European countries. I hope to study abroad at least twice in my college career so that I may further learn how stories impacted other cultures and the world around us, and different forms of storytelling. Finally, I'm going to close out my capstone with a quote from The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern. Someone needs to tell those tales. When the battles are fought and won and lost. When the pirates find their treasures and the dragons eat their foes for breakfast with a nice cup of tea. Someone needs to tell their bits of overlapping narrative. There's magic in that. It's in the listener. And for each and every year, it will be different, and it will affect them in ways that they can never predict. From the mundane to the profound. You may tell a tale that takes up residence in someone's soul, becomes their blood and self and purpose. That tale will move them and drive them, and who knows what they might do because of it, because of your words. Do not forget that. There are many kinds of magic after all.
Wow.
Thank you.